If I'd only followed my instincts, I'd never have boarded that doomed ship. When the Azure Sea Star left port, its passengers were all alive, each with smartphones and watches and tablets, as well as the cruise ship's own communications. Yet, not a single message was sent before it went missing. No distress calls. The fates of over 1,000 passengers and crew remain unknown, with only a handful recovered from a lifeboat days after the Sea Star herself vanished. But the Coast Guard's only statement on the lifeboat's recovery was that the passengers did not survive. Rumors circulated about a thermos full of eyeballs and a passenger whose mouth was stuffed full of severed fingers. But these details have been denounced as lies, sensationalizing and capitalizing on a tragedy. The official cause of the Sea Star's disappearance is a rogue wave. No survivors, no witnesses. Well, one witness. But perhaps I shouldn't tell. Better for the world if that ship stays lost forever. The families of the missing, however, deserve the truth. Which is why I'm posting. But first, a warning. The gruesome snippets I recounted above barely scratch the surface of the horror I'm about to share, some of which I took part in. I wake screaming every night. I sleep with the lights on. I never enter darkened hallways or stairwells. And I do not ever shake hands. Although I've always had some quirks, the handshake one is an old habit. Most of these are fresh, a consequence of my time aboard that doomed cruise ship. I do not intend to gloss over any details, but rather to give a complete accounting, including of my own involvement. So be forewarned. And understand that my story is one of unimaginable horror. To explain what really happened aboard the Sea Star, I need to first tell a little about myself. Sorry, I know. I'm like a bit of decorative wallpaper, just sort of there, but I see things. It all started when I was very young. I do promise this is relevant. I didn't want to swim in the community pool with my brother because the water was cloudy, hiding a shadowy figure in the deep end. I distinctly remember standing at the pool's edge, crying uncontrollably while my father urged, "Go on, jump in." My brother set the example, diving down to the bottom of the foggy water. When he came up, a silver dollar glinted in his fingers, which he dropped back into the pool before I could snatch it. "Oops, guess you gotta dive in for it." He laughed, the sun shimmering off his sunburned shoulders. "Come on, there's quarters down here too." Diving for coins was a game we played often, so I plunged in after him, kicking my way down with my eyes squeezed shut. When my hands grazed the rough cement bottom, I padded around. Silky hair tangled around my fingers like seaweed. I forced my eyes open against the stinging chlorine and shrieked. Wide, empty eyes stared back at me from a bloated face. When I shot to the surface wailing about a dead woman in the water, other swimmers looked on, perplexed. My older brother tried to console me and swore there were nothing but coins. He was correct. Not until a week later would a woman drown in that pool and sink to the bottom of the foggy water while swimmers unwittingly raced laps above her. The next time I saw was when I threw a tantrum over my grandmother's armchair. It smelled so bad, I grabbed my nose and exclaimed, "Ew!" My parents scolded me for my rudeness. Grandma occasionally struggled with incontinence. So, for her chair to stink was, they assumed, the result of an accident. They thought I was exaggerating to make fun of her, but in the sweltering summer, the smell was truly unbearable. Like rotting meat and diarrhea and cheap perfume all churned together. I threw such a fit, we left, though Grandma insisted on hugging me despite my being an awful brat. Her skin was wrinkled, papery thin, and soft as silk. But, despite the uncomfortable warmth of her apartment, her embrace was ice cold. Less than a week later, the call came. My grandmother had been found after a neighbor's complaint about the smell. She died in her chair. But when the seeing really clicked was in my tween years. 2 separate incidents. The first was after a classmate of my brother's pulled up in a car, reeking of burnt meat. The interior charred and black. He stepped out of the car, seeming not to notice that behind him, another version of him remained belted into the front seat. Unrecognizable through the char, beyond the glint of the gold chain melted into his neck. I burst into hysterical tears and screamed at my brother not to let him drive. The classmate laughed and called me a weirdo. He crashed later that week. The second incident began at a school function where my brother chaperoned me. A man pulled up in the school drop-off zones. He was one of the more popular teachers, famous for his yearly pizza parties. In the car with him were 2 young kids. I can't remember their names, just that the littlest boy was giggling and clinging to a toy T-Rex when he hopped out. My brother and I were asked to help carry the party supplies and drinks from the teacher's car. But the moment I opened the passenger door to grab a box, the reek of fetid pond water made my stomach lurch. I staggered back, clapping a hand to my nose and mouth. "Hey, everything all right?" The teacher asked. My brother, no doubt remembering what happened to his classmate weeks earlier, took me aside. Cold. Dark. The smell. Like the rot in the bottom of a lake. While I wrung my hands and sniffled, my brother watched the 2 young kids follow the teacher into the school. He shook my shoulder and said, Hey, we're going to save them." How? No one ever believes me. I believe you, Hope. Hey. He gave me a squeeze and looked into my eyes. Hope is the thing with feathers. What a dork. That line was from Emily Dickinson. My brother's favorite quote for me for when I was upset. It was corny, but encouraged me. A few minutes later, we were careening along the backwoods roads in the teacher's car. To this day, I don't know how my brother got the keys. His plan was, we'd stow the car in a garage for a couple weeks, long enough to outlast the vision, since my predictions always came true within about 6 days. But it hadn't occurred to either of us how being inside the car would affect me. The damp and rot washed over my skin. Cold. Every hair on my body stood erect, floating as if underwater. I couldn't breathe. Gagging on the fetid water, I rolled down my window. Raindrops from outside pelted my face, and something clicked. A sudden, terrible question. When I'd peered into the darkened interior, I hadn't been able to see who was inside the car. "Hey," my brother said, apparently struck by the same thought. "You're not foreseeing our deaths, are you?" I don't know if it was fate that caused us to fishtail just as he spoke, but also he may have hit something because there was a bump. All I know is suddenly we were flying, off the road and over the side toward a lake, and then plunging. And I snatched for his hand as the impact slammed us forward into the dashboard. Then the water wasn't just in my mind. It was real. It was pouring in through the car window. I fought, flailing, unbuckled, floundered through the half-open window. Luckily, I was still small enough to get through, swimming up and breaking the surface. "Corey? Corey!" But I knew already that my brother wasn't coming up. His hand had been cold when I touched it. Naturally, his death feels like my fault. In kinder moments, I remember that I was a child, and try to forgive myself for letting him get behind that wheel. But for a time, I was driven by the fierce need to atone. I sought desperately to save even one life, any life. I'd see a body swaying from a beam in a construction site. Legs dangling from the trunk of a car on the highway in front of me. A suitcase on sale in a luggage store, dripping blood. Every time, I tried to prevent the death, only to fail, or worse, cause it. Each loss drove home more deeply my shame, my failure, until, eventually, I gave up. I don't try to prevent the deaths anymore. These days I catch a whiff of that familiar, sickly, putrid scent, and I leave. I avoid human touch, especially handshakes. I've truly become wallpaper. Able to see, powerless to prevent. My name, incidentally, is Cassandra. I changed it because I could no longer bear my birth name. If hope is the thing with feathers, I was an angel of death, harbinger of doom to my brother and others. So instead, I call myself after the Greek priestess doomed to foresee the future, but never to be believed. Unable to prevent even one single tragedy. But let's get back to the cruise. The missing passengers. The eyeballs in the thermos. Oh, those grisly details. Mind you, Once you know, you can't unknow. No matter how much you drink or smoke, or however you drown your despair. Speaking of drowning, a month ago today, I hit the big 4-0. I celebrated my 4 decades of life by doing the one thing I've done consistently since I was old enough. Drinking away my failures. Every icy grip, every unheeded warning, and especially those times I've well and truly fucked up. Oh yes, those are the ones that call for some hard forgetting. I was on my 2nd, or 7th, drink at my favorite bar when a voice exclaimed, "Evening, friend." A woman with shimmering purple eyeliner and matching purple hair approached. It was the musician who often played there, Lily Tsuki. To be honest, she was the primary reason I frequented that bar, though we'd hardly spoken beyond my occasional compliments about her playing. She slid into the seat next to mine and clinked my glass. "Roy at the bar told me it's your 40th. I see you in here once a week. Always tipping well and drinking like you're trying to drown yourself. Someone did something kind for me recently, so I'm trying to pass it on." She fished a hand into her pocket and, to my surprise, produced a gift card for a cruise. I didn't catch all of her story in the noisy bar, but apparently one of her admirers was very rich. Always offering her gifts verging on the inappropriate. After finding out she'd be playing on the Azure Sea Star, said admirer sent her the card so she could spoil herself on the cruise. She didn't feel comfortable accepting, so she gifted it to me. "There's enough on there to cover your fare. Don't thank me, thank you. I needed to get rid of it. Enjoy your 40th, friend." As she handed me the card, her fingers brushed mine. Warm. Alive. I mumbled my thanks, cheeks warm. Why? Because she chose me? Blushes? I'm an idiot. Still, I was glowing, and not just because I was tipsy. Why not? Why not treat myself this once? The Azure Sea Star. It sounded like a dream. I'd go see Lily Tsuki play at the piano bar against the backdrop of a glimmering ocean. I'd drink under the stars, get a tan, get my sea legs. And every hand would be warm, and every breath would taste of the summer breeze. 9 decks, 11 including the crew-only levels. Over 1,000 people. Pools, bars, restaurants, lounges, cafes, spas, cabaret. The Sea Star truly was the Ritz-Carlton on the water. I was absolutely giddy. Of course, before the luxury came the wait. Just like the airport, parking, luggage, ticketing, security. It was when I neared the entrance for ticketing, enjoying the summer breeze, that I caught the traces of a sour odor. A whiff of decay. So faint beneath the car exhaust and smell of the salt water that I might have missed it, were I not attuned to death. At port, it was likely an unfortunate animal packed into a shipping crate and decomposing. I'd even read horror stories of people trafficked in sealed shipping containers and asphyxiating. That faint whiff made my insides curdle. Then I was inside the air-conditioned terminal, packed with passengers, and inhaling nothing but the blessed AC. The check-in was surprisingly quick. I followed the embarkation signs up the escalator to the terminal's upper level. Through the double glass doors, greeted on my right by printed images of pool decks and steaks and wine glasses. On my left, through the enormous paned wall of glass, the Sea Star herself loomed. My God, she was enormous. So many decks, so many balconies. Then I squinted a little closer. What was that speck? A tiny figure, draped on a railing. My heart dropped to my toes. Something was horribly wrong. The figure, small against the massive width of the ship, had no face. Only a torso and most of its arms. It had been decapitated, and dried blood splattered the rail. My footsteps slowed. I pressed against the glass, eyes rapidly roving the rest of the ship. Was it just one incidence of violence, or... Perhaps I wasn't seeing correctly. It was a stunt. A practical joke, a mannequin. I needed to get closer. I hurried along the terminal, joining the line out to the gangplank. The bowl of the sky had turned deep purple, the sun lowering towards the horizon, and in the Sea Star's deep shadow, the temperature dropped. A sudden chill gripped me as I trotted out onto the gangplank. I sniffed. Sniffed again, more deeply. Rot. The same putrid odor I'd caught outside. A passenger ahead of me noticed me grabbing my nose and remarked, "Not used to that ocean smell?" I did not respond, because now that I was close enough to see the ship more clearly, I noticed. Cracked glass. Broken panes in the sliding glass doors of the cabins. No! I gasped, sinking to my knees, and the passenger kindly leaned to help me up. As her hand seized mine, it was cold. I jerked back so fast I actually collapsed into the passenger behind us. A mother and her daughter. My hand brushed the daughter's bare arm. Cold. "Are you okay?" asked the daughter, a child of about 12. I crawled back from her, and another person, an elderly gentleman, leaned down to help me up, his hand on my elbow. Cold. "Miss?" he asked. "Miss?" But I bolted, barely hearing their cries as I launched myself back towards the terminal. No. My eyes watered, and my belly bunched into knots, and my heart lurched into my throat, and oh God, the ship! The whole entire ship! It was dark. Windows broken. Not a single light shining in the interior. And spatters of blood here and there visible on its decks and balconies. But worst of all was the smell. I hadn't even entered the ship yet, and I already knew, in the way only I can know, that the smell wasn't just one body or two. Not if I could detect it all the way out on the gangplank. All the way out at the entrance to the terminal. For the whiff of putrefaction to have spread so far, the source was something massive. A colossal pile of decomposing bodies like a herd of dead elephants. That ship. No one on that ship was going to make it back. As I entered the terminal with its blessed filtered air and the windows between me and the ship, I turned and looked at the line stretching behind me. Passengers laughing, chatting, dressed in their finest, flirting, teasing, buzzing with excitement, old and young couples, children. Everyone on this ship is going to die. And I'm the only one who knows.